Is someone lost? This simulator isn't for moms and daycare dropouts. That's what they told her. They laughed at her age, mocked the scar on her shoulder. One called her a relic, but she said nothing, just stepped into the cockpit, and seconds after launch, the room began to shift. Officers leaned in. Jokes stopped. Someone reached for the override key, then hesitated. A line of code flashed once across the screen, then vanished. It wasn't supposed to be there. No one said a word, until someone in the back muttered, "Who the hell is flying that pattern?" You're watching Veteran Biker. Tell us where you're watching from, and don't forget to subscribe. The wind at Edwards Air Force Base carried more than dust that morning. It carried history, regret, and the slow turning of eyes. Is someone lost? This simulator isn't for moms and daycare dropouts. The voice rang sharp from across the hangar, cutting through the air like a well-aimed insult. A cluster of SEAL trainees laughed, loud, unfiltered, confident. One of them, Lieutenant Briggs, leaned against the console with arms crossed and a smirk too big for his jaw. She didn't look at him, didn't look at any of them. Avery Shaw just signed her name once firmly on the clipboard. The pen trembled slightly in the officer's hand, but not in hers. "You sure you want to do this, ma'am?" the young clerk asked, keeping her voice low. No answer. Avery handed back the clipboard and stepped through the threshold into the prep bay. She didn't walk like a legend. She didn't dress like one either. Standard issue flight coveralls, dusty boots, and a rolled duffel bag slung over one shoulder. Her hair was tied back in a low knot. No medals, no patches. Only the faint trace of a scar cutting from her collarbone to the back of her shoulder was visible when the collar slipped just slightly. None of them noticed it, or if they did, they mistook it for old injury, not a classified history. "Briggs, you're up next. Let the lady stretch first. Might loosen her joints before she breaks something." More laughter. Even the techs at the monitor chuckled. Avery ignored them all. The simulator bay was dim, lined with reinforced glass and embedded holoscreens. It mimicked the inside of a next-generation stealth fighter cockpit, wrapped in an immersive 4D training field that blurred the line between code and combat. Skip Donnelly was already there, pretending to recalibrate the system. His eyes flicked up as she entered. For just a second, his professional mask cracked. Recognition flared, but he said nothing. She gave a slow nod. That was enough. "Pilot Shaw," Skip called out, voice neutral. "Simulator 4, you're cleared for a 12-minute test run. Standard evasive pattern, level 7 difficulty." He was lying. Behind the console, he had manually elevated the test to SEAL Plus protocol. Unauthorized. Dangerous. Impossible for most. He didn't do it to sabotage her. He did it because he knew if she failed the easy test, no one would care. If she beat the hard one, someone might finally ask why she ever disappeared. Avery stepped into the simulator and lowered herself into the pilot seat. Her fingers slid across the harness like they remembered every bolt. One of the younger trainees leaned into the glass. "She looks like she's buckling into a recliner. You sure she's not here for a nap?" Briggs grinned. 3 minutes. She's not lasting a second more." Behind the glass, Skip tapped a code into the control terminal. "Start the timer. Initiate sim. 12 targets. 2 minutes in." The simulator lit up. Projected sky, enemy drones, encrypted patterns. For anyone else, it would take a few seconds to adapt. Avery didn't blink. Her hands moved, not smooth, but surgical. Stick, throttle, switch, recenter, lateral dip, ascend, brake line, lock, release. Within 30 seconds, 4 drones had vanished from the display. "What the hell?" one of the officers whispered. By minute 2, she had dropped 10. Briggs wasn't smiling anymore. Inside the cockpit, Avery's breath never wavered. The hum of the simulator vibrated through her bones like a lullaby she'd memorized long ago. A red light blinked on the command screen. Skip stared. It shouldn't be red. "System alert," one of the texts said, frowning. "Unusual telemetry pattern, cross-referencing with stored combat logs." Behind him, one of the assistant instructors leaned in. "That flying, it's not standard. Who taught her those maneuvers?" Skip didn't answer. Then a soft tone chirped. One line of code flickered into existence on the diagnostic panel. "Signature pattern detected, Ghost 9. K9. A second later, it vanished. No one in the room spoke. But something in the air cracked, a silence like the breath before thunder. The sim continued. Avery banked hard left, then rolled through 2 enemy lock-ons without triggering a single alert. Outside the glass, Briggs took a half step back. His face had gone pale. "No one flies like that. Not even Tyrone S," he muttered. Skip looked over at him just once. "Yeah," he said softly. "Exactly." The clock read 3:14. Avery still hadn't missed. In the far back of the control room, a colonel put down his coffee, eyes fixed on the screen. "Get General Conrad on the line," he said. Someone reached for the override key, then hesitated, and behind the glass, Avery Shaw kept flying like she'd never stopped, like the sky had just been waiting for her to return. By the time the simulator clock struck 4, the hangar had gone silent. No more jokes, no more smirks. "Lieutenant." Briggs stood stiff by the glass, arms now folded not in confidence but in disbelief. The others, SEAL trainees and instructors alike, watched the display as if it might suddenly explain itself. It didn't. Inside the cockpit, Avery Shaw continued to fly like her bones had never left the sky. "Telemetry still spiking," one tech whispered. "Our trajectory maps are overlapping with legacy combat logs. This doesn't make sense." Another tech swore under his breath. Cross-checking again. Nothing matches. Except, wait, there's a ghost log tag, Ghost 9. That's supposed to be a dead pattern. Skip Donnelly kept his eyes glued to the data. He hadn't moved since the alert appeared. "She shouldn't be here," one of the officers murmured. "But she is," Skip muttered. General Marcus Conrad arrived 7 minutes later, not because someone had called him officially, but because someone had whispered. Whispers reached the ears differently. He stepped into the command booth just as Avery executed a split spiral escape from a triple target pincer. 3 drones exploded off-screen before they could relock. The moment he saw the flight pattern, he stopped cold. A part of him wanted to deny it. But that banking angle, that rolled back into the fire, the way she rotated through thrust vectors without inertia hesitation. No hesitation, no recalibration, just pure muscle memory. His voice was low, almost unsteady. "Who authorized this simulation?" The room turned. Skip took a breath. It was unofficial, off record. "Then pull her out." He didn't. "I said, pull her out." Skip's hand hovered above the shutdown key, but he didn't press it. He turned slowly to Conrad. His voice was barely above a whisper. "Sir, we found the K9 signature. That one name froze the general. K9, not a call sign, a shadow." Avery had once been the most advanced experimental pilot in the Ghost Protocol program, a Black Ops offshoot of the Stealth Air Command Unit. Officially, she died during the Kandahar Black Reversal. The record said mechanical failure. The files were sealed. The personnel involved were reassigned or discharged. Some, like Skip, kept quiet. Others, like Conrad, signed the closure papers themselves. Avery's death had been the price of burying a mistake. And now she was back. At 8:43, the simulator signaled final approach. Remaining drones, 2. Inside, Avery's posture hadn't changed. She'd sweat through her collar, but her breath was even. Target 1 disabled. Target 2 decoy rerouted and double-tapped mid-dive. The sim went dark. Final time, 11:08. Total confirmed kills, 128. Accuracy, 98.4%. The room stayed dead quiet. On screen, the system flashed. New all-time record. Pilot unknown. Prior record, Lieutenant Briggs, 49 kills, 87.1%. Briggs stared like his bones had turned to sand. Avery emerged from the pod slowly, tugging off the helmet. Her hair clung damp to her neck. No one spoke. She looked around the room once, then directly at General Conrad. He met her gaze and didn't look away. 2 hours later, she sat in Processing Room C, lit by one flickering fluorescent light. No badge, no official escort, just Skip and a laptop with no internet connection. Her old ID sat on the desk, scorched. The photo was worn. Conrad entered alone, closed the door. He stood for a while before speaking. 12 years. She nodded. They buried me in 8. He didn't deny it. You should have stayed gone. I tried. He looked down. The screen showed her final score again. He tapped the line that read, "Pilot unknown." They'll want to know who flew that pattern. They already know. Silence stretched. Finally, he asked what he had been dreading. Why come back now? She said nothing for a long time. Then, because the silence got louder than the engines, he sat. She pulled down the shoulder of her coverall slightly. The scar was clearer now, and beneath it, more visible in the dim light, was a biometric tattoo, faded but unmistakable concentric data rings fused with an encrypted ID spiral, once used in the Ghost Flight program. It glowed faint red. "Still functional?" Conrad asked. "Only when it matters." He rubbed his temples. "You're a ghost, and ghosts don't come back without a reason." "No," she agreed, "but sometimes they come back when someone needs reminding they existed." He nodded quietly. "You just broke the simulator. You broke Briggs. You broke our logs. The DOD's gonna call in hours." She didn't respond. He looked at her one last time. "Welcome back, K-9." She stood. "I never left." By midnight, a copy of the simulator footage had already made it onto a secure internal network. And somewhere in a Defense Department server farm, a buried combat signature tagged as deceased lit up for the first time in 12 years. Active, K-9. The next morning, the base buzzed with whispers. Not official orders, not press releases, just tension. "Did you hear what happened in Sim 4? She flew through SEAL Plus protocol like it was nothing. They say she used a flight pattern that's been dead for over a decade." Most of the chatter ended when Avery stepped into the hallway. She wasn't in a uniform, just a grey flight jacket zipped halfway, cargo pants, boots too old to shine. Her posture was neutral, but the silence she carried into any room did most of the talking. Lieutenant Briggs sat on a bench near the mess hall entrance, talking low to 2 trainees. When he saw her, he paused mid-sentence. She walked past him. No glance, no nod, no acknowledgement. That somehow stung more than a confrontation. General Conrad's office sat in the restricted northern wing. 3 guards stood outside, not ceremonial. Activated, Skip Donnelly was already inside, seated across from the general with a secured tablet in front of him. "She still hasn't answered any formal debriefs," Conrad said, arms crossed. "She won't acknowledge the K-9 tag, won't confirm the flight pattern." "Because saying it out loud makes it real," Skip replied. "Once she claims it, it's public. No more shadow, no more plausible deniability." Conrad paced once behind his desk. "You realize what's at stake here? If K-9 is confirmed active, the Black Reversal gets reopened. The inquiry, the operations report, and the truth. Don't be naive, Skip. Truth doesn't survive politics, maybe not, but ghosts do." Conrad stopped pacing. "We both signed those files. I agreed to bury the mission, not the pilot." Their eyes locked. The silence held a decade of resentment, guilt, and unfinished sentences. Avery found the hangar quiet, not empty, just quieter than before. A young female tech saluted as she passed. "Ma'am." Avery gave her a soft nod. Inside Sim Bay 4, the pod sat open but idle. She approached the console. Her hand hovered above the screen but didn't touch it. "Thinking about round 2? The voice came from behind. "Skip, She turned slightly. He stood holding a black duffel bag. These came out of the archive lock. Found your old files. He unzipped the bag and pulled out a flight helmet, matte black, ghost insignia still faint on the side. She stared at it for a moment, then took it silently. Skip spoke softly. You know they'll never admit what they did. I'm not here for that. Then what are you here for? She looked down at the helmet to remind them what silence costs. An alert blinked on the base-wide system. Security lock. SIM data requested DoD internal access. Level Red Conrad saw it the same moment it hit. He slammed the override key, but it was too late. A mirrored copy of the SIM run had been extracted, not leaked, queried, which meant someone with internal authority was already looking. He opened his comm. Get me Lieutenant Colonel Halston at Cyber Command, now. In a briefing room 2 floors down, a team of analysts was running her footage frame by frame. A junior analyst paused it at 6:32, where Avery completed a maneuver that had no name. She dives into the blind zone, then pivots in reverse into a non-tracked axis. That's impossible under current protocols. Another zoomed in on the HUD overlay. Her targeting reticle auto-adjusts before the SIM even updates. That's predictive instinct. You don't teach that, you survive it. Back in the mess hall, Briggs sat alone, poking at untouched eggs. Across from him, Captain Dawn sat down, arms crossed. Well? He looked up, guarded. I was wrong. She raised a brow. You think? He didn't answer, just stared at the wall. Dawn's tone softened. They're saying she was Ghost Protocol, that she's the K9. Briggs shook his head slowly. Doesn't matter who she was, we all saw what she is. That afternoon, Conrad met her again. This time in a side hangar, under no cameras, no clearance logs. He handed her a folder. Thin, no logo. Inside is your new assignment, advisory role, training command. Your record will remain sealed, but your authority will be respected. She didn't open it. And the other pilots? They'll fall in line, or they'll leave. She took the folder, looked him in the eye. I'm not here to be respected. Then why accept it? She zipped the folder into a jacket. Because you don't change the system from the outside. He exhaled slowly. For the first time, something like respect glinted in his expression. They'll still call you a relic. She nodded once. Good. That means they remember, but someone else remembered more. A name scrolled across a secure terminal in Washington. RE, pilot code K9 access attempt logged. Clearance overridden. A woman in a grey suit read the alert. Her eyes narrowed. Then she clicked a secure channel. We have a problem. She's surfaced, and she's not hiding anymore. Voice on the other end, contain it? No, she said. Not this one. Track everything, everyone, especially anyone who calls her K9. And the screen went dark. It began with an unscheduled audit. Officially, that's what it was called. But the convoy of unmarked black Suburbans that rolled onto Edwards Air Force Base didn't bring auditors. They brought heat. Civilian suits with military postures, earpieces, no name tags. They moved like they didn't need introductions and didn't want to leave fingerprints. The woman in the lead was the same one who read the K9 alert. Grey suit, no insignia, hair tied back with precision. Her badge had no department, just a clearance tier that made everyone shut up and step aside. General Conrad met them at the command center. He didn't offer a handshake. Let me guess, Washington didn't like what they saw. The woman gave a half smile. They liked it enough to come see it for themselves. Or bury it, he said flatly. She didn't deny it. Avery was in the simulator bay when they arrived. She saw them through the glass, figures in suits talking to base command like they owned the ground they walked on. Skip was already there, arms crossed. He turned to her. You knew they'd come. They were always watching, she replied. Skip hesitated. They don't want you reinstated. They want to erase this again. Wipe the footage. Shut it all down. I know. So what's the play? I don't need them to validate the truth. I just need them to react to it. Outside, the audit team entered the main SIM archive room. One of them plugged in a secure black drive, started initiating data extraction. Another pulled override codes from a satellite link. The screen blinked red. Error, data access blocked, legacy protocol ghost. 9 locked. The room shifted. The team leader narrowed her eyes. Who's still linked to this protocol? Only one biometric ID remains valid, a tech replied. It's embedded in a flight tattoo. Pilot designation K9. Still active, only if she's alive. The woman turned. Find her. Avery was already standing in the center of the empty hangar when they arrived. No helmet, just her, boots planted, arms at her side. I heard you were looking for a ghost, she said quietly. The lead agent approached. This isn't a debriefing, it's a containment review. You're not authorized to be flying. That program was shut down. She looked him in the eye. Then why is it still reacting to me? Behind her, the simbay powered on without a touch. The lights dimmed and screens flickered as if drawn to her presence. Biometric interface confirmed. A voice from the system said, Pilot K9 registered. The agent's jaw tightened. Deactivate the AI. We can't, one of the techs called. It's locked in live protocol. She's the only one with override access. The room turned to Avery. She stepped forward. The projector lit around her like a rising storm. The images were not training maps. They were battlefield recordings, archived, unreleased. Kandahar, Reversal, Ghost 7. A collective breath caught in the room. One frame showed her jet-breaking formation to dive into enemy fire. Another showed 6 soldiers clinging to the ground as her plane pulled a banking maneuver between gunfire bursts. The final clip showed her ejecting mid-air after taking damage, her body spinning in flames before blacking out. The screen cut to black. Then a single word appeared, existence denied. Avery looked at the audit team. That's the truth you buried. But the system didn't forget me. The woman in grey took a step forward. You weren't supposed to survive, I know. And now? I'm not here for revenge, Avery said. I'm here for memory, for all the names that vanished with mine. I'm the only one still breathing. Behind her, Skip tapped a screen. You better stop trying to contain her and start listening. The woman looked at Conrad, then back at Avery. This doesn't leave this room. Avery stared her down. It already has. Later that night, encrypted data packets moved quietly through back channels. One went to a defense analyst blog, another to a retired pilot forum, a third to an airbase in Arizona, where an old ghost unit flag still hung in a sealed locker. None of them screamed. None of them were accused. They remembered. In a barracks hallway, a young pilot opened her inbox. She clicked on the video and watched as a jet spiraled through anti-air fire and came out clean. She didn't know the pilot, but she stared at the flight pattern for 10 whole minutes. Then she whispered, "She's real," and closed her laptop with shaking hands. Back at Edwards, Avery stood alone on the roof. The wind pulled at her jacket. Below, the lights of the base shimmered like stars. Skip joined her quietly, handed her a folded paper. She opened it. It was her personnel file, the sealed one. Reclassified. Active, Avery Shaw alias. K9 status, non-official operative, internal assignment, advisory command, ghost flight reclamation. She didn't smile, just nodded once. Below them, in the darkened simulator bay, a technician finished resetting the HUD. Not to erase it, to train with it. The training wing had been quiet for weeks. Ghost flight reclamation wasn't on any recruitment bulletin, and Avery wasn't assigned a classroom. What she got instead was Hangar 12, a half-abandoned drone repair bay with enough empty space to land 2 fighters and enough broken tech to remind everyone that this part of the base wasn't meant to be seen. That made it perfect. She didn't want the ones who looked for glory. She wanted the ones who stayed behind after the lights went out. They started showing up in 2s, then 5s. Some were pilots, some were techs. One was a former drone operator who hadn't flown in 2 years. Nobody spoke in the first sessions. They just watched. And when Avery walked them through her first maneuver, without notes, without diagrams, just hands and silence, they leaned in. By the end of the 3rd session, half the group had memorized her entire flight loop by muscle alone. Skip watched from the mezzanine, arms crossed. "You've got them," he said. No ranks, no pressure, just instinct. Avery didn't smile. Instinct is all that kept any of us alive. Meanwhile, the footage continued to spread. Quietly, a weapons system contractor posted a blurred screenshot of her HUD. The image was taken down in 30 minutes, but not before it hit 5 classified Discord groups. One analyst ran a spectral pattern match and confirmed something no one else dared say publicly. The pilot in the footage was moving faster than the system could log. The simulator had been playing catch-up. On base, General Conrad convened a closed-door meeting with the Oversight Committee. He played the entire sim footage in full. When it ended, the room was silent. One colonel cleared his throat. "Are we acknowledging this?" Another replied, "We already did." By watching it, Conrad looked at the younger officers. "If any of you think this is just nostalgia, you're wrong. She's not back to teach tactics. She's here because the skies changed and none of you saw it happen." Outside, Avery stood in the early dawn, watching 2 rookies rehearse her split dive loop with hand signals. They were rough, but not lost. She approached them slowly. "You're pushing too early on the second pull. Trust the delay." One nodded. "We were trying to match the timing from your footage." "Don't." She looked him in the eye. "Match the intent, not the motion." He nodded again. The other, a woman with cropped hair and dark circles under her eyes, asked softly, "How did you learn that maneuver?" Avery paused. "By surviving it." Later that day, she stood in front of the simulator again, not to fly, just to watch. The footage was still looped to her final engagement, but this time someone had left annotations on the side. Questions, assumptions, arrows showing suspected trajectories. Avery read them all, then wiped the screen. She started writing her own notes, not as a correction, as a message. The next time she came in, there were more students. The original 5 had grown to 16. Some still wore active flight badges, some didn't. No one asked about her rank. They asked about her turns, her reversals, her throttle delays. One asked why she banked left when the AI predicted a right escape. She answered, "Because AI doesn't account for fear." Meanwhile, the woman in grey returned to Washington. Her report was 1 page. It didn't name Avery. It didn't acknowledge K9. It simply stated, "Asset uncontained, under observation, influence expanding within the tactical sphere." That was enough. Back at Edwards, something shifted. A drone exercise scheduled for a Thursday afternoon was rerouted to Avery's hangar. Unintentional, the email said, but the text brought the feed. Then someone pulled her footage up again for reference. Then one of her students asked, "Can we test it in a live sim?" Within 40 minutes, 5 rookies were flying a watered-down version of her sequence. 2 crashed, 1 managed to complete it. Avery said nothing. That night she received a note, not emailed, not texted, hand-delivered. It read, "Next test is Friday. They want you to fly." No signature. She arrived before dawn. Hangar 12 was lit and the sim was prepped. A small crowd was present, officers, observers, contractors, even Briggs. He didn't speak, just watched. Avery stepped into the cockpit. This time, no mocking, no comments, just a room holding its breath. The screen booted up. A different environment. Weather, turbulence, simulated urban structure. AI opponents are not drones but manned fighters. She adjusted nothing. The test began. What followed wasn't perfect. She took hits, made mistakes, nearly blacked out on a spiral pull. But she recovered, adapted, moved like someone who didn't fly for the score but for survival. When it ended, her kill count was below 128. Her accuracy is lower, but the feedback loop was clear. Adaptive memory, reflex override, predictive breach of simulated AI. When she stepped out, there was no applause, just silence. Then Briggs spoke. That wasn't a record. She looked at him. No, it was a lesson, and walked away. Later, in the dark, Skip found her sitting by the edge of the old runway. They're not mocking anymore, he said, but they're not clapping either. They don't need to, she replied. Not yet. He looked at her. You think it's enough? She shook her head. It's never enough. But it's beginning. From a nearby observation tower, someone snapped a photo of her under the floodlight. That image, Avery sitting alone, helmet at her side, would later appear in a magazine. The caption didn't name her. It just said, some pilots retire, others wait for the sky to need them again. It started with a call General Conrad wasn't expecting. The Secretary of the Air Force's office didn't leave messages. They summoned. Conrad stood in the Pentagon's 11th floor briefing room, grey suit among medals and glass, when the secure monitor blinked on. The voice on the other end wasn't curious, it was surgical. We reviewed the Edwards packet. Ghost signature confirmed. Is your airbase under control, General? Conrad didn't blink. Operationally, yes. And culturally, he hesitated. Changing. The line clicked. No goodbye. By the time he returned to Edwards, a memo had already arrived. Top clearance, full audit, not of Avery. Of him. He stepped into his office and found Skip Donnelly waiting with a sealed folder. No words, just gravity. Skip placed it on the desk. Careful, sir. Some files bite when opened. Conrad didn't flinch. He opened it. Inside the original K9 mission file, the unredacted debrief, the flight logs from Kandahar reversal, footage no one outside the Black Tier had seen in a decade. Where did this come from? He asked. Skip tilted his head. You think I'm the only one who kept a copy? That night in Hangar 12, Avery stood before her students as they tried to replicate the Ghost 7 split arc. They failed, again and again. She said nothing, just watched. On the 5th attempt, the youngest of them stalled mid-turn, ejected too early, and watched the sequence collapse in real time. I'm sorry, he muttered. She walked up to him. Don't be. The mistake isn't failing, it's not knowing why. He nodded slowly. Then why'd you survive it? He asked. She looked out at the sim. Because I didn't have a choice. Elsewhere, the woman in grey received her second alert in as many weeks. Internal network breach. SIM data pulled, not leaked, reanalyzed. This time by 3 separate foreign signals. Ghost Flight Protocol was on a dozen watch lists again. She made the call to Central Command. Status? The voice asked. She's not just being studied, she said. She's being followed. Shut it down. It's too late for that. Damage control's the only option. At Edwards, Conrad called for an unscheduled gathering in the base's oldest flight hangar. It wasn't a ceremony, no flags, no press, but everyone came. Cadets, officers, engineers, even Briggs. Conrad stood at the center, file in hand. This base was built on flight history. Some of it is proud, some of it is sealed. He turned to Avery, standing off to the side, no uniform, just the flight jacket, scar visible above her collar. We buried a lot of names to protect a few reputations, he said, and I signed off on one of them. He stepped forward. I won't apologize. That's not what this is. Avery didn't move. He knelt. The room inhaled. I'm not asking for forgiveness. I'm returning what we stole. He held out the old Ghost 7 insignia, the one stripped from her file. She took it without a word. Behind them, Briggs stepped forward. "Ma'am," she turned. "I've been reviewing your footage, all of it." She raised her brow. He cleared his throat. "I was arrogant, thought this was just about flight, but it's not. It's about everything that came after." He paused. "I was wrong." She didn't say anything, but she didn't walk away. Within 48 hours, a new flight module appeared in the internal pilot curriculum. Unconventional pattern recognition, Ghost 9, no attribution, no credits, but everyone knew. Avery declined all interviews, all commendations. She spent her evenings in the sim, watching others attempt her sequences, correcting without talking, adjusting without needing authority. One night, a young pilot approached her quietly, Latina, mid-20s, unsure. "I think you saved my aunt," she said. Avery tilted her head. "Kandahar, 2013, recon unit." She said a fighter flew in against orders. Avery didn't confirm, but she reached into her jacket, pulled out an old patch, handed it to the girl. "Ghost 7. The girl didn't ask for a name. She just nodded and walked away. Later that week, a secure memo reached the Pentagon. Subject line: RE, Aviation Override. Ghost Protocol Discovery Channel footage request stamped denied. But the request was still logged. It was spreading, and no one could stop it. It wasn't the footage that finally broke containment. It was the light. The briefing room was full, too full. What was supposed to be a tactical strategy update had quietly turned into an ambush. Not hostile, just political. Uniforms filled every chair. Commanders, DoD observers, advisors who hadn't touched a cockpit in 20 years. At the front stood Avery, requested, not ordered to speak. The room had questions. She was told this wasn't a debrief, it was a review, an open discussion. But every word hung like a verdict. They started with the mission tapes. Kandahar, 2013, Ghost 7's dive, the impossible pullout, the extraction of 6 pinned operatives under AAA fire, the silence after the blackout. Then came the overlays. Her new simulator run matched frame for frame against the old logs, identical angles, same evasive spins, same split-second counterthrust that only one pilot had ever survived. Someone asked, "How did you learn to breach the AI's reaction curve?" She didn't answer. Another asked, "Is your signature in the legacy system a result of unauthorized access or residual biometric coding?" Still silence. Conrad finally spoke. "She doesn't have to answer that." The room turned. He continued, "Because the system already did. It's not a guess, it's a match." One of the younger officers leaned forward. "Then why not show us the interface, the one embedded in her ID?" Avery met his eyes. No fear, just inevitability. She stepped forward, pulled down the collar of her flight jacket, then unzipped it fully. Beneath it, she wore a plain black tank. The room didn't blink until she turned. Her back was a battlefield, burn scars laced across one shoulder and down her side, but in the center, perfectly intact, was the tattoo. It wasn't art. It wasn't personal. It was architecture, a full biometric array. Circular patterns of data-synced filament ink, lines that pulsed faintly red as the room's tactical projector scanned her. The glow wasn't bright, but it was alive. The system chirped, authentic interface detected. Ghost 9, live. Avery didn't speak. She didn't have to. A technician stepped forward, pale. That shouldn't be functional anymore. The Ghost Protocol ink was designed to decay within 6 years, Conrad replied, unless someone survived long enough to keep using it. Silence. Then murmurs. Someone stood. I was at Ramstein when they shut the protocol down. We were told no one made it through Kandahar. Avery turned to face him. They were wrong, and suddenly she wasn't the one on trial. The room was. Files were reopened, footage re-examined. Officers who once dismissed Ghost 9 as myth now requested access logs. Some of them remembered fragments, Rumors of a pilot pulled out of rotation, too damaged to be debriefed. One remembered a medevac with no name attached. Another recalled a budget line that disappeared mid-quarter. One by one, the pieces came back, and by the end of the day, the Pentagon had logged over 50 new internal file access attempts, all for one pilot ID, K9. Back on base, Avery didn't mention it. She just kept training. Her students now numbered 23. They flew harder, crashed less. No one asked about the tattoo. They didn't need to, but others noticed. An Air National Guard unit requested permission to review her maneuver logs. A NATO analyst sent a formal inquiry regarding non-standard reaction loops. Civilian contractors began whispering about organic override response, a phrase not heard since 2014. Skip came to her with a hard drive. "They're gonna come for this," he said. She looked at him, then let them. That night she sat alone in the bay, watching an empty sim run through her old trajectory, line after line, curve after curve. None of it was theory anymore. It was lived. She rolled up her sleeve and placed her forearm near the biometric scanner. The system pulsed once, then opened a menu labeled Ghost 9. Priority user K9. She typed one word, reclaim. The screen blinked. Legacy node confirmed. Chain of command override available. She hesitated, then hit enter. In Washington, the secure server hosting Ghost Protocol archives flagged a code it hadn't seen in over a decade. Real-time biometric access. Legacy authority. One clearance officer choked on his coffee. Another called up a supervisor. Within minutes, 6 terminals across 3 branches lit up with the same ping. Somewhere underground, in a room without windows, someone whispered, "She just woke the system," and then the lights dimmed. The first ping hit at 2:41 Zulu time. A dormant node at a decommissioned Arctic satellite relay went live for 1.4 seconds, just long enough to verify Avery Shaw's biometric hash. 30 minutes later, a burst packet confirmed a handshake with 2 systems in Colorado and 1 floating access point off Diego Garcia. The Ghost Protocol hadn't just been reactivated, it was spreading. At Edwards, Avery stood in front of Hangar 12's outer terminal, her reflection flickering in the touchscreen. Skip stood beside her, arms folded, watching the Ghost Network nodes come online one by one. None of them showed names, just old call signs, encrypted IDs, dead codes blinking to life. Skip exhaled slowly. "You realize what this means?" Avery nodded. "It remembers us." She didn't smile. She just entered a new command. Link, request fleet, Echo 9 status. The system processed, then returned, node found, ID, recon moth, status, unassigned, standby last ping, May 2014. Skip's face tightened. Recon moth? That was Kira Mendez's unit. Avery said nothing, but something behind her eyes shifted. She tapped once to begin trace packet rewrote. In a NATO logistics hub in Germany, a junior analyst noticed an anomaly in their shared US data feed. He flagged it, but didn't escalate. It looked like a ghost signal, some legacy junk from the war archives. But 3 minutes later, the same signature reappeared in a French drone coordination subserver. Then, in a Canadian air defense node, the N in a UN humanitarian logistics array. It wasn't a breach, it was a pattern. By the time it was cross-checked against old classified logs, it had already vanished again. The only thing left was a name buried in a tag signature. K9 back at Edwards, Avery received an encrypted flash message routed through 4 layers of military-grade obfuscation. It had no subject, no name, no intro. It read, "6 of us. We saw the dive. The command line is still intact. We never stopped waiting." She stared at the screen, then typed a single line, "I'm not flying alone this time." She sent it. 5 seconds later, the message blinked, delivered to 11 nodes. Skip looked over her shoulder. How many do you think are left? Avery leaned back. More than they expected. Less than we need? Outside the bay, a transport truck offloaded a sealed container marked obsolete hardware. Inside were parts of the original GhostNet control interface, a system once housed inside a mobile command drone that disappeared during the Kandahar pullback. She walked up to it slowly, ran her fingers across the scarring on the casing, then whispered, "You made it home at the same hour." The woman in grey sat in a closed room deep beneath the Pentagon. She was not alone. Around her were 4 other directors, black-tier decision-makers, none of whom existed on paper. A single line ran across the center monitor. Ghost protocol status. Resurfaced, she spoke first. She's relinked the nodes. No leaks yet, but the lattice is forming. Another director frowned. "Can it be co-opted?" "Not without her," she said. "The system was imprinted biologically. It's hers now, so we kill it." "No," she replied. "We listen, because whatever she's building, it's moving faster than we can chase." No one answered. But one of them tapped a pen once before saying, "Then maybe we don't stop her. Maybe we use her." She looked at him and said nothing. At sunrise, Hangar 12 was open. No orders, no announcements, but pilots showed up anyway. Briggs stood off to the side, watching one of the younger cadets attempt Avery's second evasive loop. He crashed, got up, tried again. Briggs turned to her. "You always knew it wasn't about the flight hours." She nodded. "It's about what you're willing to do when the sky turns against you." He looked out at the sim. "So what happens now?" Avery watched the next pilot line up. "Now," she said, "we teach them how to fly when no one's watching." The command came from no chain of command. It didn't need to. The GhostNet lattice had reached 12 global nodes by midnight, 6 active, 3 listening, and 3 reawakening from systems thought decommissioned since 2015. The network pulsed not like a signal but like a heartbeat, one rhythm, one source, and she was standing at its center. Avery didn't flinch when the backup grid surged. Edwards dimmed momentarily as legacy systems rebooted in silent synchronization. Screens that hadn't been touched in over a decade illuminated in sequence, HUDs flickering with the original combat overlays of Project Ghost. She didn't blink. Skip stood at the console beside her. This isn't a network anymore." "No," Avery said. "It's a recall." She keyed in one phrase, "Protocol reactivation." Override K9, off level, biometric, symbolic the system processed. Then responded, recognized. Ghost 9, identity integrity 99.997%. Continuity node alive. The bay lights flickered. Behind them, old drones powered up, some experimental, some retrofitted stealth units, not for deployment, not yet, but watching. Listening. In Germany, a former engineer who once programmed GhostNet's dynamic failover noticed her old account was ping active. She hadn't logged in since her forced discharge. She stared at the screen, then opened a message that simply read, "We need your override. Nothing else matters." She typed back one word, "alive." In Okinawa, a grounded pilot with a rebuilt spine pulled out a crate he had sworn never to open again. Inside was his helmet and a patch, Ghost. 7. In Montana, a disused relay station began to route secure communications. No one admitted how. The system just obeyed. Avery walked the length of the hangar, her boots echoing across polished steel. At each station she passed buzzed alive. Diagnostics, sim logs, archives, the fingerprint of a forgotten fleet. She stopped at a secure vault door labeled Archive 7, Prototype AI-linked flight patterning. Access denied. Skip looked at her. "You really think it's still in there?" She didn't answer. She raised her arm, the tattoo on her upper back still partially visible from the shoulder strap gap, lit faintly as she turned. The scanner read it. Access granted. The door hissed. Inside was a console, covered dust-thick. She peeled it open. Inside, full Ghost. 9 integration module, pre-collapse code, pre-redaction. Skip breathed. This is what they erased. No, Avery said, running her fingers across the controls. This is what they failed to bury. She connected her ID band. The screen came alive. 10 seconds later, the interface displayed status linked to global lattice. 13 nodes. Active. 5 observing. 3 in transition below that. New message. Shall we begin? Origin unknown. Skip leaned closer. Is that a threat? Avery smiled. It's a question. She typed yes, then hit enter. On the western side of the base, in a repurposed radar bunker, the first group of new pilots began filtering in. Some were in full uniform, others wore only partial gear. No one spoke much. Avery met them in silence. Behind her, one of the original GhostNet combat drones rose into position, not to fly, just to witness. She looked at her new team, young, unfinished, but watching, and already beginning to understand that she wasn't here to lead by orders. She was here to teach what had been erased. I'm not here to train you for war, she said. They waited. I'm here to teach you what they hoped you'd never survive. The repurposed radar bunker was silent now. No monitors blared, no instructors shouted, only the humming presence of something older than most who stood inside. Avery watched her recruits settle into the semicircle of grounded flight pods, refurbished shells from GhostNet's first iteration, all patched, all waiting. Each pod bore a name now, not assigned, chosen, call signs painted by hand. Skip finished calibrating Pod 4. He stepped back and nodded. Fully synced. It's reading 3 microseconds faster than baseline. Avery nodded. Good. That means it'll survive long enough to learn. The youngest of the new cadets, Reyes, raised her hand. What exactly are we flying against? Avery met her eyes. Ourselves, and what they built to erase us. Then she stepped forward, keyed the main terminal, and activated the simulation suite. From Ramstein Air Base to the training platform at Guam, ripple effects were already reaching the chain of command. Unmarked transfers, unauthorized network calls, cross-branch signature mismatches. At Wright-Patterson AFB, a special internal task force began compiling a report, the title Project K9. Emergent override disruption. The conclusion, inconclusive. The classification, above top secret, compartmentalized. The comment left at the bottom of the file, she's not breaching protocol, she is the protocol. Inside Archive 7, Avery and Skip monitored combat logs. Each pilot's sim metrics are streamed in real time, reaction thresholds, neural lag, and AI sync ratios. What struck Skip wasn't the numbers, it was the patterns. These kids, they're improvising, he muttered. Exactly, Avery said. That's what the system couldn't handle. GhostNet was never broken by brute force. It collapsed under the weight of conformity. Skip watched another maneuver flash on screen. That shouldn't be possible with a 2-second lag. They're flying instinct, not doctrine. Behind them, a new message appeared. Node 15 active. ID Wolfstorm. Skip blinked. Wolfstorm? That's... Avery smiled. An old friend. The next alert hit harder. Node 16 active. ID Night Hollow. Priority flag. HVT interceptor. Skip turned. That's one of the shut-down Black Ops squadrons. They're not shut down anymore. Far outside the base, in a nondescript hangar off Nevada's Highway 95, a quiet activation protocol began. A biometric lock disengaged. A vault door rolled open to reveal a sealed, fully intact GhostNet command hub. Inside, a single line of red text glowed, auth token verified, contingency rebuild initialized. For the first time since the program's burial, Command Tier 0 was active. Avery stood on the observation deck that evening. The flight line below shimmered under floodlights. Her new team stood in formation, not in order. By choice, she could see it in their stance. No one asked for permission. They simply showed up. Briggs walked up beside her. "I ran your Kandahar sim," he said. She didn't respond. He added, "I got to 41 kills. Then I got vaporized." Still, she said nothing, but it felt real, like I could almost see what you saw. Avery finally turned. "You didn't see it. You felt it. That's the difference." Briggs nodded slowly. "Are we ready to show them what this means?" Avery looked down. "Not yet," she said, "but soon." In Washington, the directors met again, this time with real-time telemetry footage on a looping screen. The woman in grey stood silently, then asked, "What are we dealing with?" A colonel from Strategic Systems answered, "She's rebuilding the protocol's original command structure, but updated. Tighter lattice, decentralized sync. It's faster, smarter, but it only obeys one signature. Can we match it? No, not unless we clone her. And we tried. A beat. Then we don't match it. We recruit it." Someone scoffed. "You want to hire the ghost?" She didn't answer. She just played a clip of Avery walking through Hangar 12, followed by her new pilots. They walked in silence, like shadows, like something ancient returning. Back in the bunker, a notification chimed. Node 19 synced, fleet split detected, 2 sub-lattices active. Avery paused. Skip frowned. "Split fleet?" She studied the display. "Someone's building another network. Not against us?" "No," she said. "Inspired by us." The screen showed a new origin point, unlisted base ID. "East Africa. Looks like we're not the only ones resurfacing." The coordinates came encoded in a pulse transmission. No origin timestamp, no encryption header, only a 6-character tag, SDW-92. Avery stared at the feed. The display had redrawn itself. The ghost lattice, once a single web across Avery's pilots and the legacy fleet, now branched. The second cluster pulsed from a different hemisphere. Sub-lattice confirmed. No known authorization keys. No visible command structure. Yet perfectly functional. Skip stood frozen beside her. "That's not just a shadow copy." "No," Avery murmured. "It's a parallel command. In a classified desert grid known only as Point Helix, a hangar opened to reveal 3 aircraft unlike any in the existing GhostNet logs, sleek black-bodied frames built for near-orbit maneuvering. No visible seams, no known serials. Inside the central command vault, a woman in an unmarked flight suit stood alone before a biometric scanner. Her call sign blinked once. Shadow Lead. She pressed her palm against the interface. Access granted. Node 20 active behind her. Another screen lit up. Ghost. 9 signal detected. Lineage trace confirmed. She didn't react. Just spoke one phrase. Phase 2 begins. Back at Edwards, the sim room grew tense. Skip filtered incoming node data, eyebrows narrowing. This second net, it's not broadcasting the GhostNet protocol exactly. It's using our code, but not our rhythm. Avery leaned in, meaning it's not just inspired by us, it's trained against us. Her jaw tightened. They've been simulating us. Reyes looked up from her terminal. "So what now? Fight them?" Avery didn't answer. Instead, she brought up the original GhostNet rule set, the combat overlay used in Kandahar, redacted since 2013. She placed it side by side with the incoming SDW pattern. They matched. Except for one thing, the SAW version predicted Avery's maneuvers with 94.2% accuracy. "They know me," she said softly. Skip whispered, "Or someone used to." Washington, 3:40 a.m. The woman in grey stood alone in the Situation Room. "Show me the original GhostNet clearance list." A folder loaded. She scanned names. Avery Shaw, Skip, Briggs, dozens more, all redacted. until one name blinked yellow. Lieutenant Kira Mendez, status deceased, access Tier 3 override, mission Archangel Obsidian. The woman frowned. Tap the name, review active node participation. She hit yes. A new map appeared. Node 20, Shadow Lead, Kira Mendez, alive. At Point Helix, Kira studied the last sequence of Avery's Kandahar sim, an archived reconstruction built from telemetry, now enhanced with AI patterning. "I could have saved her," she whispered. One of her lieutenants, masked and nameless, replied, "You survived. That was the mission." Kira didn't respond. She turned to the screen, pulled up a file marked Recon Moth, her old call sign. Status, compromised, override active. "Prepare the counterframe," she said. "We're flying against her now. She deserves it." Skip threw down the printout. "You never told me she survived." Avery didn't flinch. She didn't. "Not the version I knew. She's building a fleet to mimic yours, counter you, possibly overwrite you. And you're calm? She's not mimicking. She's correcting." Skip exhaled hard. "So you're going to fight her?" "No," Avery said. "I'm going to finish what we started." He blinked. "By doing what?" "By flying the mission they buried us for." The first encounter came at dawn. No announcements, no military protocols. Just two vectors colliding in a training sector marked Red Line, 30,000 feet above neutral airspace. Avery's squad had been running Formation Delta, 4 trainees in modified simcraft, shadowed by 2 ghosted legacy drones, when one of the overlays blinked out. "Phantom contact! Vector 072, Skip warned." Reyes pulled back hard. No signal beacon, no if. Before Avery could answer, the skies lit. Out of nowhere, 2 sleek black craft curved into formation with impossible smoothness. No weapons deployed, no comms opened, just presence. Total, calculated, watching. "Is that them?" Briggs whispered. Avery didn't answer. She didn't need to. The one on the left rolled slightly. A nod. The universal pre-combat signal. Kira's fleet had arrived. For 6 minutes, no one fired. They danced. The simcraft darted, looped and tested patterns. The shadow units mirrored, then inverted every maneuver. A game of chess in the sky. Every tactic Avery had taught her students, the shadows anticipated, countered, without breaking rhythm. Reyes gasped. "They're not reacting, they're preempting." "Because they've seen this playbook," Avery muttered. "We wrote it together." And then the black lead ships surged forward. Avery broke formation and climbed. The 2 vectors spiraled, their contrails spiraling upward like twin comets. Private comms opened, one-on-one. Incoming transmission, Node 20, Shadow Lead. "I never stopped flying, Avery. I just stopped waiting for you." Avery exhaled. "So this is it?" "No. This is what we should have done years ago. Finish the Ghost." They didn't fight with missiles. They fought with memory. Maneuvers born in split-second decisions from a decade past. Patterns no computer could simulate fully because they were born of loss, fear, and instinct. Avery banked left. Kira cut under her. Kira surged. Avery let her pass, then dropped, rolled, echoed a maneuver known as Fang Cut, which they'd co-invented in 2012. Kira matched it, modified it, made it hers. Skip's voice came low over comms. "They're not trying to destroy us. They're rewriting the doctrine in real time." Avery smirked. "Then let's write back." Below, the new recruits began mimicking, not with confusion but awe. They synced their systems to the unfolding ballet above, learning on instinct alone. Reyes said softly, "This is a transmission, not a battle." At the Pentagon, satellite overlays are caught every second. The room was filled with quiet. Then the woman in grey stood. "This is no longer a split protocol," she said. "This is a cultural rebirth." One admiral stood. "Ma'am, what do we do?" She didn't hesitate. "Let it happen." Avery's craft slowed. Kira did too. Both hovered, the sky holding its breath. Then, simultaneously, they triggered a joint override, one that had never been seen publicly. Ghost convergence. Activate. Every aircraft in both fleets buzzed alive with a new overlay. Neither GhostNet nor ShadowNet. Something new, a new lattice formed. No leader, no war, only shared command. Avery's voice echoed across the net. You taught me how to survive. I'm teaching them how to outlive. Kira responded, then let them fly. The systems synced, HUDs rebooted. The legacy was no longer fragmented, it was airborne. They called it a convergence, but the truth moved faster than language. Within 12 hours, 3 unaligned units in different hemispheres switched from dormant to active. No orders, no flags, just the shared code. Across the Arctic Rim, a forgotten research platform near Novaya Zemlya powered on. A lone technician blinked as a data node screamed alive with pattern overlays, identical to those from Edwards and Point Helix. He said nothing. He simply saluted the screen. At Edwards, Avery stood beneath the floodlights, watching the latest batch of cadets line up. But something had shifted. They didn't wait for permission. They organized themselves, synced naturally. Pilots with no command history now operated like veteran flight crews. Their HUDs no longer required instruction. They adapted, responded, and forecasted threats on instinct. Reyes approached her. The system keeps updating itself. It's learning. Avery nodded. So are we. Skip ran up with a new printout. Command Lattice just absorbed Node 23, a forward drone outpost in Madagascar. No crew, no AI signature, but it aligned with convergence within 4 minutes. She took the file. We didn't design this to scale. You didn't. But maybe it was always supposed to. In Washington, Joint Command met again, this time without military formality. The woman in grey stood before a silent table. She played back footage of the convergence, then maps, timelines, reaction logs. It's spreading, she said, and it's doing so without fail, without violence. It's not a coup, it's a culture. One general leaned in. You want us to embrace an uncontrolled global protocol built on old ghosts? No. I want you to stop fighting it, because the ghosts aren't dead. They're flying again, a younger admiral asked. How long until someone turns it weaponized? The woman smiled grimly. Someone already did. 12 years ago, and it buried the program. Now she tapped the screen. This time, the pilots are the firewalls. Kira stood aboard a refitted command deck inside Node 20's mobile air carrier. Around her, young pilots studied new overlay maps. None of them spoke of war. They spoke of formations, energy patterns, ethics of override use. She watched in silence. Avery's voice came through secure band, encrypted only at the surface. We never got to teach this way. We only passed what they allowed. Kira replied, now they can't stop us. A beat. Then she said, tell them the story of the Obsidian Strike, the one they never heard. Avery smiled across the void. You sure? Truth doesn't fracture, it converges. The story went live within 24 hours. A coded broadcast, overlaid inside the convergence net. It wasn't a military order, it was memory, declassified in voice and motion. 6 pilots, 1 impossible mission, a field abandoned by the Pentagon, a rescue done against protocol, a signature erased, until now. The world saw what had been scrubbed, and for the first time they didn't just admire Avery, they followed her. Thousands of comments poured in from anonymous terminals, secure frequencies, X-squad tags. I was there. I thought we were gone. She brought us home. About damn time. Give her the sky back. Avery didn't respond. She just walked onto the flight line. And for the first time in over a decade, the system didn't log her as a relic. It logged her as active. The sunrise over Edwards was unusually still. For the first time in days, the skies were quiet. not from absence, but anticipation. All across the airstrip, pilots stood lined in silence. No formation commands, no roll calls, just presence. At 0600, the comm towers lit up with a single ping code of the sky. Initialize Avery, standing at the hangar's threshold, read the message and felt no surprise. It wasn't a command. It was an invitation. The convergence had matured. It no longer needed deployment chains. What spread now was doctrine pushed from peer to peer, like stories, not strategies. Inside simulators, cadets ran ghost memory drills, recovering trajectories from erased battles, blending logic with impulse. In some remote bases, they trained using only shadows and terrain echoes. Sightless, soundless, a memory war, but none of it felt like war. It felt like preparation. For what? No one said aloud. Skip entered with a new data node. Another integration complete. 73 nodes now. Cross-confirmed, no AI misfire. Reyes added, civilian units are engaging too. Old cargo drones in Kenya, salvage flyers in Ukraine, even private contractors. They're sinking. Good, Avery said. That means the code isn't gated. It's understood. Kira's voice patched through. They're not waiting for approval anymore. Avery smiled. Neither did we. At the Defense Intelligence Annex, a new crisis meeting was convened. But there were no alarms, only projections. A whiteboard listed the top 5 traditional threats to national stability. Every line had been replaced. First, distributed doctrine. The woman in grey spoke. This isn't a rogue actor problem. It's a trust shift. People are believing pilots more than procedures. One advisor asked, what's our containment strategy? She didn't blink. We don't have one. We only have 2 options, recognize or retaliate. The table stayed silent. Then she said it. If we retaliate, we become the reason they fly. On the tarmac, cadets began organizing a flight event. No medals, no spectators, just signal replay. A full-scale reenactment of the Kandahar mission, rewritten from Avery's truth. Kira arrived via vertical drop from Node 20. She said nothing, just nodded. Reyes whispered, she looks older, but she flies younger. Scars age you, but they also clarify. Avery stepped forward. Everyone in the sky today does so by choice. No rank, no obligation, just legacy. She paused. And one last override. She keyed in flight-directive.freedom. One by one, the aircraft began lifting. No call signs, only echoes of the erased. The reenactment turned into a living archive, not a simulation, but a reclamation. Every destroyed node, every hidden pattern, every pilot who went missing, their data restructured into motion. Memory became muscle. Briggs, once mocking, now led his own cell, flying a pattern originally created by a pilot who never returned from Obsidian. He landed beside Avery. I used to think this was about winning, she replied. It's about witnessing. That night, a signal went out to every satellite under ghost or shadow designation. It wasn't encrypted. It said, flight code aligned. Total signature reclamation. 128 nodes confirmed attached was a statement, authored jointly by Avery Shaw and Kira Mendez. No protocol lasts forever. But the sky does. We no longer fly under orders. We fly because someone buried the truth, and we still remember how to find it. In the final scene, Avery stood before a newly painted wall inside Hangar 3. It was blank until the cadets started painting. No insignia, no banner. Only the names of the pilots were once erased. And across the center, one phrase, code of the sky. The wind over Grayson Range came down in a low, steady push, as if the sky itself were bracing. Inside Hangar 6, the last analog flight recorder blinked for the first time in 13 years. Not because someone activated it, because it synced. Avery Shaw stood near the far wall, jacket unzipped, staring at the metal coffin of an old Viper-class fuselage, the one she flew out of Kandahar. the one no one had dared to scrap. Kira joined her. "They're uploading it," she said quietly. Avery nodded. "Let it burn through." At that moment, across 51 command sectors, a new category began to populate inside secured air defense logs. Status: Ghost validated pilot ID, Shadow Echo. Legacy confirmed the network wasn't just remembering, it was registering. In Antarctica, a solar drone tethered to obsolete recon AI lifted without command. Its flight path traced the exact arc used by Avery's missing partner 12 years ago. Not a glitch, a choice. Kira looked out the hangar window. "They're doing it by memory alone." Avery stepped forward. "Then we've won." Kira shook her head. "No, we've returned. Back in Washington, inside the DIA Black Chamber." The woman in grey reviewed a final file marked OpSky Release Total. All tags had cleared, all signals are open, and no escalation. She stood, and then, with all eyes on her, she said, "Erase our list." Every node they touched, reclassify as allied. "But ma'am, if you can't outfly them, don't chase ghosts. Let them define the horizon." At 1,600 hours, the last government airspace directive quietly sunsetted. No press release, no fanfare, just a terminal flash. System recognized flight code freedom in effect across the net. Veterans, former cadets, fallen. Node IDs and even blacklisted units received one synchronized ping, "Welcome back." Briggs stared at the message from a cold observation seat at Node 12. He looked at Reyes. "We're not observers anymore, are we?" She smiled. "No, we're what the system tried to forget." And it just remembered. Avery stood before the glass memorial wall outside Edwards. Names had been etched by hand. No last names, no ranks, just code names. Signatures, ghost call signs. A young girl, barely 15, stood near the edge, tracing a name, Wraith 6. Avery came beside her. "You knew them?" The girl didn't look up. "My mother. She flew without a number, but she told me you never let go of the sky." "I didn't," Avery said, and with a quiet hand she placed a small patch in the girl's palm, an old embroidered sigil, K9. Then she whispered, "Now neither will you." The sky didn't echo, it absorbed. By the end of the third day, 36 countries had reported active convergence links, not as interference but alignment. Civilian traffic systems began picking up shadow overlays. Disused control towers at decommissioned airfields pinged back into service, spontaneously linked to what the media now called the ghost grid. No press briefing could contain it, no chain of command could override it, because this wasn't a mutiny, it was a migration. At Edwards, the wall of names had grown too large for the hangar, so the cadets projected it into the sky. Drones, obsolete, repurposed, hovered silently above the base, forming the code names in light. K9, Wraith 6, Talon Echo, Evenfall, Aegis Burn. Names lost to old battlefields, now looped through a pattern that changed hourly. Briggs, now a lead trainer, stood back in silence as the light cycles passed. He wore no insignia, only a grey patch with the phrase, "I fly what they forgot." Inside Hangar 3, Avery stood with Kira beside the newly unified control console. "This isn't a system anymore," Kira said. "It's a conversation." "Then we'd better keep listening." Reyes entered with a new file. "We've got a request from overseas." She handed the datapad over. On screen was a request from a newly formed pilot unit in Chile, young aviators who'd rebuilt a stealth glider using archived specs from the Convergence library. They weren't asking for permission to fly, they were asking for input. Avery read it and smiled. "Send them Node 14's memory bank. They'll know what to do with it." At 2,200 hours, the final override protocol was activated. Reclaim-code.active. Every satellite once registered to the Ghost protocol initiated a sequence. Instead of blacking out, they brightened. The skies were now lit with low-orbit beacons, spelling one shared phrase, "The sky remembers." Pilots across 5 continents watched in silence, and in unspoken response across hundreds of towers, a forgotten switch flipped. Severo, node link, full access granted. Avery stared at the uplink. "No more permission slips," she said. At the Defense Intelligence Archive, the woman in grey sat alone. Her screens flickered with convergence overlays. She typed one final entry into a black field of text. Project K9 was never terminated. It evolved. Recommendation: no further interference. Observation only. And then she stood. She stepped to the window where, high above, a drone painted with old Air Force colors etched a slow spiral through the sky. She nodded once, then whispered, "Don't come back down." The final ceremony wasn't broadcast. There were no cameras, no ribbon cutting, just 2 chairs are placed on an empty runway. Avery sat in one. The other remained empty until a young girl walked out. Not military, no training, but with a name patch stitched to her hoodie. Dusk 3, she sat. Avery asked only one question: "Why do you want to fly?" The girl answered, "Because I read what they tried to delete." Avery looked ahead. "Then you already know how." And she stood. The girl stayed seated until the sky pulsed once above her, accepting the call. That night, as the last echo of the Ghost protocol cycled through the net, a new protocol entered the lattice. Future-code.seed. Its origin wasn't traced, its logic wasn't linear, but it bore a single line of metadata: Auth, Shaw, Mendez. Truth the tag: 01,100,000,10,111,001. Translation unknown, but the message unmistakable. The next sky doesn't belong to them. It belongs to the ones who never stopped looking up. The sky didn't echo, it absorbed. By the end of the 3rd day, 36 countries had reported active convergence links. Not as interference, but alignment. Civilian traffic systems began picking up shadow overlays. Disused control towers at decommissioned airfields pinged back into service, spontaneously linked to what the media now called the Ghost Grid. No press briefing could contain it, no chain of command could override it, because this wasn't a mutiny, it was a migration. At Edwards, the wall of names had grown too large for the hangar, so the cadets projected it into the sky. Drones, obsolete, repurposed, hovered silently above the base, forming the code names in light. K9, Wraith 6, Talon Echo, Evenfall, Aegis Burn, names lost to old battlefields now looped through a pattern that changed hourly. Briggs, now a lead trainer, stood back in silence as the light cycles passed. He wore no insignia. Only a grey patch with the phrase, "I fly what they forgot." Inside Hangar 3, Avery stood with Kira beside the newly unified control console. "This isn't a system anymore," Kira said. "It's a conversation." "Then we'd better keep listening." Reyes entered with a new file. "We've got a request. From overseas." She handed the datapad over. On screen was a request from a newly formed pilot unit in Chile, young aviators who'd rebuilt a stealth glider using archived specs from the Convergence library. They weren't asking for permission to fly, they were asking for input. Avery read it and smiled. "Send them Node 14's memory bank. They'll know what to do with it." At 2,200 hours, the final override protocol was activated. Reclaim-code.active. Every satellite once registered to the Ghost protocol initiated a sequence. Instead of blacking out, they brightened. The skies were now lit with low-orbit beacons spelling one shared phrase: "The sky remembers." Pilots across 5 continents watched in silence. And in unspoken response across hundreds of towers, a forgotten switch flipped. Severo, node link, full access granted. Avery stared at the uplink. "No more permission slips," she said. At the Defense Intelligence Archive, the woman in grey sat alone. Her screens flickered with convergence overlays. She typed one final entry into a black field of text. Project K9 was never terminated. It evolved. Recommendation: no further interference, observation only. And then she stepped to the window where, high above, a drone painted with old Air Force colors etched a slow spiral through the sky. She nodded once, then whispered, "Don't come back down." The final ceremony wasn't broadcast. There were no cameras, no ribbon cutting. Just two chairs are placed on an empty runway. Avery sat in one, the other remained empty, until a young girl walked out. Not military, no training, but with a name patch stitched to her hoodie. Dusk 3 she sat. Avery asked only one question: "Why do you want to fly?" The girl answered, "Because I read what they tried to delete." Avery looked ahead. "Then you already know how." And she stood. The girl stayed seated until the sky pulsed once above her, accepting the call. That night, as the last echo of the Ghost protocol cycled through the net, a new protocol entered the lattice. Future-code.seed. Its origin wasn't traced. Its logic wasn't linear, but it bore a single line of metadata. Auth, Shaw Then Mendez. Truth tag 01 trillion 100 billion 10 million 111,001. Translation unknown. But the message unmistakable. The next sky doesn't belong to them. It belongs to the ones who never stopped looking up. The sky remembered. And now, so do we. What started as a classified override buried beneath layers of silence has become a living map of resilience, etched not in medals but in memory. The Ghost Grid wasn't created, it was revealed piece by piece in the hearts of those who refused to forget. From Avery Shaw's final override to the silent ascent of Dusk 3, this wasn't just a redemption arc. It was a recalibration of truth. We saw the ones they silenced rise again, not with force, but with flight. Not to erase the system, but to outlive it. They mocked a flight test. They erased her name. They buried what scared them. But what they failed to realize was that legacy doesn't live in clearance levels or command chains. It lives in motion, in silence, in the echo of a sky that never stops listening. Across borders, across systems, the Ghost Grid lit up, not with war, but with choice, with children flying in honor of the erased, with pilots syncing memories from aircraft that never officially existed, with voices once lost in static now clear across the world. This isn't just the story of Avery Shaw, it's the story of everyone who ever flew without permission, of every name that never made it to the wall, of every override code whispered in the dark hoping someone would respond, and now we have. The question isn't whether they'll try to bury the next truth. They will. The question is, will someone still be listening? Will someone still be flying? Will someone still remember how to find it? If this story moved you, if it stirred something in your chest, a flicker, a fire, you're already part of the grid, and you don't need clearance to carry it forward. Leave a comment. Tell us who you're flying for. Share this story with the next generation. And if you're not ready to land, subscribe, like, and stay with us. You're watching Veteran Biker, where stories like this were never meant to surface, but now they soar. We'll see you in the next sky.